The other day I was kicking back, relaxing, about to fall asleep, and I kid you not, my tiny little toddler walks up to me and forcibly opens up my eyelids. I'm not making this up. This is literally what he does when I try taking a nap around him. I'm not sure exactly why, and it's also worth mentioning it doesn't go both ways. Like if I really don't want him to take a nap because he's not going to fall asleep at night, he just completely loses his mind if I do that to him. So out of all the things that could possibly bother him in life, this is the one thing that he chooses: me resting and taking a nap. He just absolutely can't take it. Anyways, think twice before having children. You have been warned. In today's video, I actually thought that we would take a look at the DC Multiverse line, or just the DC line in general from McFarlane, and we would break down what, in my personal opinion, are some of his biggest fails with the line. Like, what are some of the things that just completely made me lose my mind? And I think it not only made me lose my mind, but I think it potentially made him lose, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and maybe even a ton of different supporters that were consistently buying his action figures. Today we're going to count them down, not in a numbered way because I don't want to structure this video, but just in general. Like, these are the top failures in my personal opinion. Like, every single one of these releases, every single one of these choices literally almost led to the demise of McFarlane. I still think he did relatively well. There were a lot of different websites that were claiming that McFarlane, as long as he had the DC license, there were stretches where he was the top seller here in the States, if I'm not mistaken, or just in general. So that just goes to show that he was doing really well. Now, obviously, volume isn't everything, and the last few months, even the last year or so, has definitely showcased, I think, a little bit of a downfall from the DC license from McFarlane. But without further ado, let's get straight into it. Let's not waste any more saliva or breath or any of your valuable time. The first biggest fail that I can remember, like in recent memory, has to be the whole digital nonsense that McFarlane was trying to shove down our throats. I believe there was like a digital build-a-figure wave, and then there were other things where you would buy a particular action figure and then you could actually get the digitally rendered action figure ported on to like an account somewhere. I'm not sure exactly how it works because I personally never did it, but I just thought it was complete nonsense. It was complete buffoonery. It was just a cheap way for him to not have to manufacture anything. And it was funny because I remember actually seeing a lot of these interviews from people bashing McFarlane over the whole digital figure nonsense, and the way that or the way that he tried to excuse himself in front of his consumer base was that some people didn't have space to collect action figures, and so digital build-a-figures, or digital figures in general, or just digital images, would kind of like counteract that. But at the same time, if there are people that are that constricted of space, I don't think that they're wasting their money on action figures. Like, he made a point of referencing that certain people live in like tiny little 400 square feet apartments. I don't think those people are actively buying your collectibles, McFarlane. I don't think those people are actually collectors. They're probably worried about like upgrading their financial situation. So I don't understand that point of view. I just felt like it was a really cheap way to, not have to manufacture like extra accessories for his collectibles. And I think it was just a way of him to try to kind of like connect with some of the younger members in the community. Like, maybe he felt that people were into like digital content, and maybe this could be a really big opportunity for him. But I just don't think that he understands the concept of it. It felt like he just kind of saw a post online, saw a TikTok or something, and then thought like, yes, this is a great opportunity for me to cash in on it. It was an absolute mess, and I think it kind of led a little bit to his downfall. Obviously, it didn't lead to his demise. We've already covered this. I think he just didn't want to deal with the DC license anymore, and Mattel completely outbid him. I don't think he lost the license. I don't think Warner Bros. Really cares as long as they're getting paid. I don't think they really care about what McFarlane is doing with the line. So yeah, that definitely has to be one of the bigger failures that I've seen from McFarlane. And as I said, I think that was one of those weird moments where we actually saw McFarlane truly not understand what's going on in like modern day culture. But anyways, let's move on. One of the other bigger failures, and I'm going to kind of group these into like, I guess, one particular category, but I'm still going to break them down by releases. The first one that I think was a huge failure has to be that new Kaiju action figure that he's marching out for the new Superman live action James Gunn film. What is even this? Like, at one point we were getting deluxe action figures with like, I know they weren't greatly articulated, but there were, you know, double jointed elbows, double jointed knees, there was ankle articulation, toe articulation. The figure could get into some semi-decent poses. We had, you know, Bane, we had Swamp Thing, we had Man-Bat, so on and so forth. Like, absolutely great deluxe figures. Eventually, we got Darkseid. But this is what they refer to as a deluxe figure now. By the way, this is $50 on Big Bad Toy Store, and I think other websites have them for about that same price point. This figure looks like absolute hollowed out plastic. I'm going to almost 100% assume that this is going to be some very cheap and less durable plastic. This thing probably has like, I don't know, 5 points of articulation. Like, I think I saw a cut at the upper arms, like where the arms connect to the torso. And then I think the neck has a cut so it can kind of look around. It has a swivel there. That's it. So I'm guessing maybe like 3 points of articulation for this figure. I'm just baffled that he thinks that people are this stupid, that they're just going to buy a $50 action figure of just a giant hollowed out piece of plastic. I don't understand what's going on. Let's assume that it isn't hollowed out. Are you kidding me with the articulation? Like, we're going from like getting Bane for $40 originally, or let's say like Swamp Thing for $42, $43, to getting this hunk of plastic. I'm just so confused. And the fact that he feels that this is a good idea. This is, you know, headed towards the end of the DC license from McFarlane, so I'm going to assume that he's kind of phoning it in. He's not really giving too much effort, but come on, I think he can do a little bit better than this ridiculous piece of plastic. I'm hoping that people just leave it on store shelves and then it eventually gets clearanced out for like $10, because you should not be paying full price for this figure. $50 is an absolute joke and a total ripoff. And following that same trend, he did release, what was it, the Kong versus the DC Universe line of action figures. I believe they've released a Kong. Well, it's a version of Kong. I'm not 100% sure who this character is, but it's like a mechanized Kong versus Flash, and then Kong versus Batman. And by the way, in case you guys are wondering, yes, that is a reuse of the 4-inch Page Puncher Batman action figure, along with just a big giant King Kong. Very little articulation. You're probably getting like 3 points of articulation. I can't even see any ankle joints, any ankle articulation. I don't see any joints at the knees. I don't see any joints at the elbows. But yeah, you're paying about $70 for this release. Don't forget that Batman, if I'm not mistaken, is 100% reuse. I just don't see the value. The Flash is the exact same situation. You're getting a Flash action figure, which we've gotten, I don't know how many different Flashes at this point. Now, I will say, I think I wouldn't say that he's burned the bridge quite yet, because a lot of the Flash action figures that we were getting were kind of like offshoots or different versions, or like Flash characters from the Multiverse. So we don't really get too many from like Wally West, or, you know, some of the most iconic representations of the Flash in comic book form. But still, it's yet another Flash with a giant hunk of plastic that it probably has hollowed out plastic and has like the most minimal articulation for $70. I don't know what to say to you guys. This is just another prime example of something that nobody should be touching at full on retail. You should definitely be waiting for this to clearance out and then purchase it, because $70, I'm not very good at math, but something just isn't quite adding up here. And then lastly, is it any doubt what I was going to put at the top spot for the biggest fail from the DC line from McFarlane? Look, he's done some phenomenal things. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The Superpowers line is great. I love the vehicles for the Superpowers. I love the vehicles that he's done for the mainline DC Multiverse. I just love what he's done. The faceplate technology that he introduced to the DC Multiverse. We'd never seen that before at like a $25 to $30 price point. He's given us so many great characters that, you know, way back in the day, Mattel just wouldn't touch. And he did a lot of great things, like give us modern day comic book representations, which is something that Mattel didn't do either for the most part. Like they would do it from time to time, but McFarlane went head in first with like the DC medals and so on and so forth. A lot of like Last Night on Earth, Batman, that wave got released, I think, within like a year or two from the original comic book series. So it just goes to show that he was very in tune with what was happening, you know, within the comic book industry. However, what he did with that Joker Deluxe $250 set was an absolute crime against like the community, and I'm glad that this is still sitting on digital store shelves. I went on Big Bad Toy Store, I scrolled down to see how many you could purchase of these, because maybe I thought, well, maybe there's only like a handful of these left, but I think it still lets you purchase like over 20 if you wanted to. I don't know who's going out of their way to purchase multiples of these, but yes, it's still available. And I know we've beaten this conversation to death. I know McFarlane's point of view, I think that the excuse that he made was that because of like the mature source material, they had to like price this collectible at a certain range. I'm not 100% sure exactly what that meant, but this was way before tariffs. This was way before price increases. It made no sense why this was being made available at $250. Yes, it did come with like a little desk. It came with an entire set. It came with some chairs, interchangeable faceplates for Joker, and then we did have, you know, Robert De Niro's character in there. It was really cool. It was dynamic. It was something intriguing. It was fresh. It was innovative. It was creative. You know, all of the above, but the $250 price point to me just didn't make any sense. We have received a lot of those diorama sets, for example, for what is it, the 1966 live action wave that he was releasing, with like the figures, the basic figures, less articulation all around, but the diorama sets were actually pretty decent. Like obviously you can't really compare the two, because one is, you know, a 7-inch line with way more articulation, way more paint apps, way more attention to detail, and then obviously the set piece was a little bit bigger and a little bit more just more detailed all around, whereas in the 1966 line that McFarlane has released thus far is kind of basic, not a ton of sculpted detail, and then there's very little paint. It's mostly just the color of the plastic, and then they piece this thing together. But still, like, we've seen some great diorama sets from the 1966 line going for about like, I think it was like $40 with no action figures included. So I don't know how he makes that spike all the way to $250. As I said, yes, it is way more detailed. It does come with 2 figures. It does come with like some little extra collectibles, but it just made no sense in my tiny little T-Rex brain, and I've racked my brain around it. Honestly, this is just another perfect example of something that you should definitely not purchase at full retail. We've waited this long. We've been patient. Wait a few more months. I think this is eventually going to drop, not by too much. I think they'll drop it from like 250 to maybe 220, maybe 180, around that price point. But even then, maybe you can bite the bullet. It's a little bit more reasonable. And I'll be brutally honest with you, as big of a fan of Joaquin Phoenix as I am, the original Joker was okay. Like, I thought it was just bloody and dark for absolutely no reason. I've never loved the idea of Joker wanting to be a stand-up comedian and then turning to a life of crime. I just don't follow that origin story. And then Joker 2, well, don't even get me started in that. But anyway, all jokes aside, there you guys have it. I don't want to get too deep into it. These are some of the biggest failures that McFarlane has ever tried to pull off on us. Most of them worked, honestly. I mean, the digital figures or the digital waves were really difficult to stay away from because they were actually like really good figures. Most of the other stuff I think is still readily available. Like, it's still sitting on shelves or digital store shelves. So I think as a community, as a collector core, we've done a pretty good job of staying away from this absolute nonsense. Let's wait until it clearances out. Let's wait until they drop the prices. Let's wait until they're more reasonable, and then we jump in on it. But anyways, those are just my personal opinions, my personal thoughts. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Let me know what are some of the biggest failures that the McFarlane DC line has had up to this point. I know we could name like a million different ones. I just wanted to name like my top 4 or 5, but let me know down below in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Stay safe out there. As always, make sure to enjoy the hobby, pose your action figures, play around with them, and make sure to stay tuned because we do upload on a daily basis. We absolutely love ranting on about action figures. So stay tuned if you guys enjoy this type of stuff. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.